Hi, I'm Katie Hewitt, director here with Usborne Books and More, and we're going to talk about do the hard things, overcoming team objections. Any good presentation needs a theme that people can relate to. So when thinking about objections that we get from our teams, I love the idea of using our books. The Wipe Clean series is perfect because what we're going to do here today is wipe clean those objections. So what is an objection? A lot of times people say an objection is a request for more information. And why do people do it? Because there's no perceived need, there's no perceived urgency, and there's no trust or maybe some fear there. And the perceived word is key here because it is based on what they know and what they don't know. So let's take a look at some common objections that we hear as a consultant. We get objections from hosts a lot. They don't have time to host. They don't know enough people to have a good party. They don't want to feel pressured, or they never have good parties. We'll hear similar things when it comes to asking people to join our team. I don't have time. I don't think I can book parties. My friends will think I'm pushy, or I'm not a salesperson. And when I asked you in a survey what hesitations or objections you had to promoting to exec, I wasn't surprised to hear similar things. Not being able to balance it all with time, being worried that you couldn't keep your status or failing, not being good enough or worthy enough to be at the top of the company, and feeling like you couldn't promote all those people. And when I asked you when it came to director, I wasn't surprised again to see similar themes. I don't have time for extra responsibilities. It's too much that's out of my control and losing momentum, feeling like an imposter with the top level people in the company, and not having the organizational skills that you need to manage a big team. So these are the common themes that I have heard from your teams and you when it comes to their objections. And that includes time and balance, fear of failure and success, reputation and what people think of them, and skills and knowledge. And we can find those four things from the time that they host a party all the way through. And so as we overcome those objections in booking and hosting, we're doing the same thing as our leaders and helping them overcome those objections to get to the next level of their business. But let's dive a little bit deeper into how people come to these conclusions in the first place. When people have an objection, it's based on the experiences that they've had in the past or heard about, what they know, their education, what they know, what they don't know, the emotion tied to it, and the current environment they're in, their current life. And what they do is they take each one of those pieces of information and they connect the dots. They connect those dots and they create a conclusion. And that conclusion determines their next decision. So, what is an objection when people say it's a request for more information? I would argue that they're not requesting any information. They're actually sharing information to you. They're actually sharing a conclusion that they've drawn based on their past experiences. So what we can really say is it's an assumption that they're making, and that assumption is an actual gift to you. And we're going to talk more about that in a second. And I got to tell you, I love assumptions. In fact, when I hear an assumption, I get really excited because I know that there is a bigger vision and picture, and that I know something that they don't. I see a bigger vision than they do. And I get to be the one that opens their eyes up to it. And sometimes when I hear an assumption, it's really hard for me. I have to stop myself from vomiting all over them because I'm so excited to share this gift that I have. But I also know that based on their experiences, they've drawn their own conclusion, and I have to make sure that they're open to seeing that big picture. So let's back up a second and let's call this presentation Wipe Clean Dot to Dot Assumptions. We're going to take those dots that people connect, and we're going to teach you how you can help wipe them clean and connect a bigger picture, okay? Because our brains do this all the time. Our brains are designed to make assumptions. It makes life more efficient. For example, you can assume that your coffee pot was where you left it last night when you wake up in the morning. You don't have to worry about that coffee pot being there or wondering where it is because you've assumed it's going to be where you left it. And that frees up your brain for bigger and better decisions that day. And there's things that we assume in our business all the time, and we're right. Like, we can assume that each month there'll be a new host special, or we can assume our books will ship from the warehouse. We can assume that a really excited host is a great recruiting prospect. And we can assume that there'll be an incentive trip announced at convention. We can assume that Heather Cobb will have amazing shoes at convention. Assumptions aren't all bad, and they're great for the little things. But for the things that require more of us, they can sometimes act as a barrier to growth and success. It is like a little chain. If you could do a dot to dot little chain, make a little chain around somebody, it keeps them from getting outside their comfort zone. It kind of tampers the brain in coming up with creative solutions. And the last thing that it does is it keeps people from taking responsibility for their own success. So everybody connects dots. Those dots create a picture in our mind, our own personal vision, and that vision, that perception determines the actions and decisions that we make in our business every single day. But your job as an executive leader is to be aware that everybody's connecting those dots and that they have missing dots, and to help them wipe clean those dots and create new dots for a bigger and better vision of what their business can be. So let's talk a little bit about the types of assumptions that people have, how to identify them, and what to do about them. Okay, the first type of assumption I see from team members is what I call pessimistic assumptions. Now, these type of assumptions are probably the easiest ones to identify, and you could probably wipe those assumptions clean with just your finger. They're pretty easy to identify, and just by giving different information to the consultant or team member, you can wipe those assumptions clean. So what does it sound like? So for a consultant, she might say, no one is interested in hosting. So these pessimistic assumptions kind of assume the worst. Or for a leader, it might be, my team isn't working right now, or I don't have much of a team right now, so I really don't need to come to convention. I really don't need to come to this meeting. They are making assumptions based on their current environment, how they feel about it, and their experiences. And you can wipe those clean pretty easily by giving them a bigger vision. So for example, for your leader, you can say, you know what? I can totally see how you might feel that way. That makes logical sense to me. But may I suggest that maybe if you come to this meeting or you come to convention, you're going to catch a vision or get excited or come up with some ideas to rebuild your team. Okay, next up are rose-colored assumptions. These assumptions are a little bit tougher, so we might need a paper towel to wipe these clean, because we're really tempted just to leave them because they are very optimistic, and that's exciting when you have such great optimism from a consultant or leader. But they can also be a little bit naive, and so we have to tread lightly with these. So rose-colored assumptions from a consultant might be somebody who says, oh, I'm so excited to launch my party. I just know that I'm going to get a ton of my friends and family to come. They're all going to support me. How many times have you seen a consultant say that? And then when one or two people maybe don't respond, or somebody that they thought would really want to be there doesn't come or doesn't respond, and then they get super bummed out. So you can help people with a bigger picture with that consultant by saying something like, that is so exciting that you have people that you know are going to love these books. I'm just going to go over with you different types of responses I find that new consultants get when they invite people to launches, and then share an experience. I might say, like for me, I only had 3 people come to my launch party, and I really thought there would be more there. But I just want you to know that we'll go over all the possible responses that you get, and then you'll have those tools to use as you launch your business. A leader might say, I know my downline leader has been really quiet lately, but I know she loves UBAM and she's really committed to her goal. And I think she just has a lot going on. And while that may be true, we know how fast somebody can spiral when they start struggling. So in situations like that, I might just let that team leader know that that's entirely possible. But let's just go over some of the things that might be going on and checking in with her. Or maybe she's having some feelings and just hasn't really communicated them to everyone, and making sure that everybody's on the same page. That's something that I'll do when people assume with rose-colored glasses. We don't want to pop their bubble, but we also don't want to be naive. One that's probably the toughest are those silent assumptions. And so I put a magic eraser next to those. Silent assumptions either are completely unrecognized, they don't even realize that they're making an assumption, or they're not communicating that assumption to you at all. Okay. So for a consultant, that might be something like in their mind, they're saying, I've tried that before and it didn't work. Maybe you've made a suggestion to somebody and they say in their head, they're going, I've tried that before and it didn't work, but they just didn't tell you that. And then they don't go and try that thing that you've told them to try. For a leader, sometimes they will begin to self-sabotage because they don't feel like they're worthy of success. And they don't even realize that they're doing that. And then they lack this intensity towards their goal that they say that they want, because deep down inside, they're not sure that they deserve it. And that's not something that they even recognize. And sometimes it's something that you have to share with them that you think is going on. And so those are the toughest ones to wipe away. But here's what I know about assumptions. Here's what I know. Here's what I've learned from you in that survey and from my experiences that I've had being in this company for 12 years. No matter what the assumption is, no matter what obstacles they have, no matter what little picture they have in their mind of how things are, there is a bigger picture there. And everything is what I would call figure outable. There is a solution to nearly every obstacle out there. There is a bigger picture to think about to every fear that's out there. And I want to share with you some of the things that our executive leaders and directors said about this. Any legitimate concerns are something my team leader and my upline have been able to teach me or guide me to find my own answers. This is real growth, you guys. If anything, promoting has helped me grow in all areas and helped me realize that I can do the things. Being a leader and upper level leader has grown me more as a person than I ever imagined and really taught me how to be better with my time management. So no matter what perception your team members have or what assumption that they have or thrown up against your conversations, know that there is a story out there. There is growth opportunity there with that assumption. So how do you do that? One thing that I heard from you is that knowing that your leader is confident in your abilities, no matter what's going on in your life, no matter how you're feeling, was key to you wiping clean those assumptions and opening up your mind to better and bigger opportunities. This executive leader said, my uplines were so confident in my abilities and made sure that I knew they were, that their confidence fueled mine. So that's one thing that you can do when your team members are making assumptions about things, is making sure that they know that you believe that they can do it and there's always a way. Another thing that you can do as a leader is over communicate. I often make the assumption myself that my team is hearing what I'm putting out there or seeing what I'm putting out there. I'll put something out on Facebook or share something, and I'm assuming that they're seeing that. And the reality is, especially these days with social media and what control they have over what people see in their newsfeed, and we have no control over what people choose to go see, it is important that we're over communicating with our team members. So over communicating to your team in many different ways is going to keep that connection open so that you can have these conversations. Another thing you can do is share stories. People have their own experiences which shape the pictures that they draw in their heads. But when you share somebody else's story, it becomes a part of theirs. And I love sharing stories that focus on overcoming hard things and achieving, and not just the achievement itself. And in sharing those stories, those become a dot for people in their connections. And they're not just stuck in their own story. Their view of what can happen in UBAM is based on what other people do too, even if they don't know them. One thing to be aware of is islands. Sometimes when we have leaders that are real go-getters, they get super excited about taking ownership of their business. And when they do that, they can sometimes take their team and put themselves on an island because they want to do things their way. They want to put their own flair into things. But if they do that too much, they put themselves on an island from the other group. And what happens with that is their experiences and the stories they hear, their dot picture gets smaller and smaller and smaller because they are only hearing and interacting with each other. And we know how powerful getting to know other people are outside your team, and what a big picture that can create. So if you have a go-getter consultant or a go-getter leader who is she started her own group, she's kind of starting to do her own trainings, you notice that her team is doing less and less on your team page and more in this small little group, you're going to want to be aware of that and really give her that big picture of your experience is great and you're an amazing leader and your leaders need you. But that exposure to other people, that bigger picture, is something that nobody can give all by themselves. Paying attention is like the biggest way to avoid assumptions, and then pointing out what you've noticed to your downline leaders. So listen for all or none thinking or black and white reasons for lack of success from people. If you hear somebody say something like that or comment or post something on that, sometimes they'll take a quick screenshot of that and send it to their upline. It says, I'm getting the feeling that this person has kind of got this assumption or conclusion they've drawn about this situation, and I think they could use a bigger picture. Who's stagnant? Who's struggling? Who isn't showing up? Who's showing up, but you notice they're not getting anywhere? Why are they not getting anywhere? Who's growing super fast? What are they doing? We can't assume that just because they're being successful that everything is hunky-dory. When people grow really fast, we should probably assume that there's some sort of struggle there with balance too that we can help them with. Let's talk about words you can use. Here's some phrases that are not defensive or argumentative that work really well when you hear an objection or assumption from somebody. Things like, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm so glad you brought that up about your worry about executive leadership. That was something that I was worried about too. Let's talk more about that. Or it sounds to me like you might be worried about this. Or it sounds to me like this is a real concern of yours. Or I can respect that. I'm sure you have a good reason to feel this way. Do you mind if I share some information with you? I love to use those words because I know I have information to share, but I'm getting her permission to share it so I don't feel like I'm vomiting all over her. That makes a lot of sense. What if you thought about it this way? Let me share a story with you. That's another way to kind of introduce it. That's possible. That's possible. So you're validating their concerns. Another thing you can ask is, I'd love to hear more about your thought process on that and just learn where you're coming from to make sure you have all the information that you need. You know what they say about assuming, never assume. We've got our little friend Donkey here, but I'm going to challenge you to always assume. Always assume that your team is assuming. They're always connecting the dots, and the only dots they have are their own dots. Our job is to vision cast, and that's what overcoming assumptions really is. It's vision casting. It's wiping clean those incomplete assumptions that they have and giving them new information or more complete information and stories and evidence so they can make new connections for a bigger and more beautiful vision of what UBAM can be for them.